Marilyn Monroe's death has always been painted as Hollywood's greatest tragedy, but the truth behind it is darker, political, and far more dangerous than anyone wanted to admit. Newly uncovered revelations suggest Jackie Kennedy herself warned that Marilyn wasn't just another fling. She was a threat, and when the Kennedys got involved, the story turned from scandal to something far more sinister. On August 4, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found lifeless inside her Brentwood home. The official report claimed she had taken too many sleeping tablets, a medication mishap that authorities quickly stamped as the cause. It sounded neat and final, but the details behind that night were anything but. Her body was discovered lying face down on the bed, clutching a telephone as though she had been reaching out for help in her last moments. Several empty prescription bottles were scattered nearby, yet toxicology reports raised serious doubts. The amounts recorded didn't fully match the scene. Even her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, gave conflicting timelines about when and how she found Marilyn, changing her account in later interviews. To make matters even stranger, neighbors reported unusual activity around the home that night. Cars pulling up, lights flickering at odd hours, and people moving in and out long before the authorities were officially called. 2 decades later, in 1982, the Los Angeles District Attorney ordered a special review of the case. Their conclusion? The evidence was riddled with contradictions and gaps. They admitted that key details could never be neatly explained. Yet, instead of reopening the case, they simply reinforced the old story that Marilyn's passing was the result of too many pills. And that's where the unease still lingers. To this day, many believe her so-called medication mishap wasn't an accident at all, but a carefully staged explanation meant to silence deeper truths. Not long before Marilyn's final days, whispers of her connection to the Kennedys had already turned into something impossible to ignore. Her infamous performance of Happy Birthday, Mr. President in May 1962 wasn't just a song. It was a spark that ignited endless speculation about an intimate bond with John F. Kennedy. But according to a new biography, the concern wasn't only in the press, it was inside the Kennedy household itself. In JFK Public-Private Secret, historian Michael O'Brien reveals that Jackie Kennedy didn't dismiss Marilyn as just another Hollywood fling. She confronted her husband directly, warning that Marilyn was different and that this one could actually be dangerous. Those weren't the words of a jealous wife. They were the instincts of someone who understood the stakes of mixing the presidency with a woman as famous, fragile, and unpredictable as Monroe. And Jackie may have been right to worry. Monroe was reportedly confiding in friends about her relationships, and some even claimed she was planning to hold a press conference to set the record straight. Imagine the headlines: America's most beloved movie star exposing the private life of America's most powerful family. For the Kennedys, it wasn't just embarrassing, it could have been catastrophic. It's this warning from Jackie that takes the story from rumor to risk. Because if Monroe truly was on the edge of going public, then what happened next starts to look a lot less like coincidence and a lot more like damage control. For decades, Marilyn's death was treated as a closed chapter, but every few years, new accounts surfaced that dragged the story back into the spotlight. One of the most explosive came from former LAPD intelligence officer Mike Rothmiller, whose book Bombshell claims secret police files told a very different story than the official record. According to Rothmiller, Marilyn wasn't simply a victim of a medication mishap. He alleges there were direct links between her final hours and the highest levels of power. His sources claimed that Bobby Kennedy, the president's brother, was at Marilyn's house the very night she passed. The files suggested heated arguments, desperate phone calls, and a woman on the verge of revealing more than she should have known. Even more chilling, Rothmiller insists those records point to a cover-up. He describes how official reports were altered, witness statements were buried, and surveillance files mysteriously disappeared. If true, it paints a picture not of a lonely star who took too many sleeping pills, but of a woman silenced before she could become a liability. Of course, skeptics argue that these claims are impossible to verify, and some accuse Rothmiller of exaggerating for shock value. But whether fact or fiction, the weight of his allegations only adds another shadow over Marilyn's final hours. And it raises a haunting question. If the Kennedys really were present that night, what else might have been erased from the record? By the summer of 1962, Marilyn Monroe's life was spiraling into chaos. On the surface, she was still the most recognizable woman in Hollywood, but behind the glamour, everything was unraveling. Her movie contracts were collapsing, studios were losing patience, and her reputation for showing up late, or not at all, was fueling a storm of frustration. She was fired from her last project, Something's Got to Give, leaving her career in freefall. But it wasn't just Hollywood politics weighing her down. Marilyn's personal relationships had become tangled with some of the most powerful men in America. Friends said she felt used, discarded, and dangerously close to being replaced in the very circles that once idolized her. She confided that she knew secrets about the Kennedys, conversations she claimed happened behind closed doors, ranging from affairs of the heart to matters of national security. If even part of that was true, then Marilyn was holding on to information that could have shaken the country. And as her career crumbled, the pressure mounted. People close to her described her as fragile, frustrated, and ready to lash out. Some said she talked about going public, while others believed she was bluffing for attention. But either way, the timing couldn't have been worse. Hollywood drama mixed with political scandal. It was a cocktail too explosive to ignore. And when Monroe's final days unfolded under this cloud of betrayal, broken promises, and powerful enemies, it started to feel less like the downfall of a movie star and more like the silencing of someone who knew too much. As if Hollywood scandal and political intrigue weren't enough, Marilyn's story takes an even darker turn once organized crime enters the picture. For years, whispers have tied her name to figures like Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana and union leader Jimmy Hoffa, men whose worlds collided with both the Kennedys and Hollywood. The theory goes like this: Monroe wasn't just tangled up with politicians. She was, knowingly or not, brushing against the underworld. Some authors claim she became a pawn in a power struggle, used as leverage against the Kennedys, then discarded when she became a liability. The mob had every reason to pressure the president, and Monroe's alleged connection to both John and Bobby Kennedy made her a dangerous wild card. Even coroners added fuel to the fire. Thomas Noguchi, the famed coroner to the stars, reviewed the case years later and said the official story left him uneasy. He pointed out that the pill levels in her system didn't match the lack of residue in her stomach, suggesting the drugs may have been administered differently than reported. That single detail has kept conspiracy theories alive for decades. And then there are the stories about surveillance. Some investigators insisted that Monroe's home was bugged, her phone tapped, and that recordings existed of her conversations with the Kennedys. But, like so much else, those tapes mysteriously vanished. Mob connections, political pressure, missing evidence. It's no wonder people believe Marilyn's death wasn't just about a starlet and some pills, but a chain reaction involving some of the most powerful and dangerous men of her time. More than 60 years later, Marilyn Monroe's final hours live somewhere between fact and legend. And that's part of the problem. So many accounts of what happened to her come from voices that were anything but reliable. Writers like Norman Mailer and Robert Slatzer published sensational stories that blurred truth with fiction. Mailer later admitted he leaned into conspiracy theories because they sold more books. Slatzer, who claimed to have secretly married Monroe, produced details that couldn't be verified. Even Anthony Summers, whose work was celebrated for its depth, wove together fact, rumor, and speculation until the lines nearly disappeared. The result? Every decade, a new truth about Marilyn emerges. Some say she was silenced by the Kennedys, others point to the mob, while some still insist it was nothing more than a tragic case of pills taken in excess. Each theory feeds the mystery, but none fully closes the case. And maybe that's why Marilyn's story endures. She's not just remembered as a Hollywood star, but as a puzzle no one can solve. Was she a victim of her own fragile state, or a casualty of secrets too dangerous to spill? What we're left with is a legend where memory, myth, and manipulation all collide, and the unsettling reality that the truth may have been buried right alongside her. And maybe that's the real tragedy. The world will always remember the glamour, the beauty, the voice that sang happy birthday to a president. But behind the spotlight, she was a woman cornered by fame and powerful forces she couldn't control. 60 years later, her death still raises more questions than answers, And perhaps that's exactly how those in power wanted it. Because in the end, the most unsettling part of Marilyn Monroe's mystery isn't what we know, it's what we may never be allowed to know.